I've been discussing thought, and primarily the nature of thought, and saying it's really, in my view, behind most of the problems of the human race. Now, it may seem to some people that a thing as abstract as thought can't be behind all these problems. There's something much more vital, real or solid must be behind them. But we have discussed it, those who have been here, in great length, showing that it is, you can see that it is behind it. You know, you can make a very good case for it. We're trying to get more volume.
Just so that
people can
be picked up.
Can be picked up. Yes. Now, I'll talk a little while, and I hope that soon we will start to discuss. And because I think it's essential to have a discussion or a dialogue. A discussion is an exchange. The word discuss is based on the same root as percussion, like a ping pong ball going back and forth. And a dialogue is something more of a common participation, as we're not playing a game against each other, but with each other. So now, see, how is it that thought, what are the troubles of the world? Well, they seem so many that we can hardly begin even to list them. You know, we can see everywhere wars going on, starvation, torture, pillage, you know, disease, all sorts of dirty tricks played in politics, and we have two sides. In addition, we have a kind of polarization between East and West. There are two sets of values. You see, each one professes its own. The West professes the value of the individual and freedom, and the East professes the value of the collective society, everybody being taken care of. And neither of these societies very well meets up to what they profess, but as we now know. Now, but still, they seem to be fighting over it. Now, or at least they're in a very hostile attitude, and they could fight. And then we have North and South, that polarization. You know, that North is supposed to be more wealthy and the South less, so it clearly is. There's tremendous trouble in Africa and South America and the southern parts of Asia. I mean, very great poverty and indebtedness and a breakdown of the economy and general chaos in what's going on there. Now, okay, so then we have the danger of nuclear war. It seems to have receded a bit because of Gorbachev, but nobody is sure that he's going to succeed, and perhaps not even he himself, and although he must maintain his confidence. And if he doesn't succeed, we will be back where we were, if not worse. So if he does, things will look a bit better. Right? Now, so if there's a nuclear war, that's sort of the end of our civilization, or if not the human race. Right? Now, then you have the danger of ecological destruction. You have pollution. You have destruction of agricultural land, of forests. You know, the change of climate they talk about now, and many other things. That there could be a real ecological disaster within us not too long a period of time if people just keep on doing whatever they're doing. And well, I don't need to multiply it. You see, we have growth of crime and violence everywhere, drugs and so on, indicating that people are very unhappy and not satisfied, and so on. So the list could be extended forever, almost. Now, I think if you look into this, it's all thought that's behind it, you see. See, thought is somehow going wrong. See, what about nationalism? You see, or what about the East-West division or the North-South? You see, people think in a certain way. They think we have our our values of the East, their values of the East are our values of the West. We think we're here in the North and we're not very responsible for the South, and the South, they're just going their own way and so on. Everybody says, I belong to this group, to this country, to this nation, to this religion, and it doesn't matter what happens to the others. In fact, if they get in my way, we'll just fight. Now, that acts as if the people are acting as if they were all independent and all rather far away from each other. And independent of each other, but in fact everybody is completely interdependent. You see, everybody depends on trade now, and if trade stops, the whole thing collapses. Every country depends on every country. Pollution crosses the boundary, radioactive clouds cross the boundaries, and everything crosses the boundaries, including ideas and violence and so on, customs, habits. But everybody's thinking as if none of this is happening, right? It seems strange why they should, because it's so obvious that it is happening. You see, if you say, why should it be? No, it's a way of thinking, right? People seem to be committed to this way of thinking, that people don't want to look at any other way of thinking, right? That people want to believe that everything is going to be all right, you see, without being too disturbed, without changing things too much. And see, people say, well, the economy is going all right here, why should we worry? I mean, some people say it isn't so good, but still those who feel it is going right say, well, it's okay for us, why should we worry about all those people? I mean, it's all right to think about them, but we needn't worry too much about them, right? But in fact, it all depends on them. You know, if it doesn't go right there, it won't go right here, you see, and vice versa. So that's a certain way of thinking. It's fragmentation, right? It's to break things up into bits as if they were independent. Now, it's not merely making divisions, but it's breaking things up, which are really not different or not separate. It's like taking a watch, I gave you an example, and smashing it into fragments, rather than its parts are taking it apart and finding its parts, right? You see, the parts are parts of a whole, but the fragments are just arbitrarily broken off from each other. And things that are really belong together are sort of treated as if they were not. That's one of the features of thought that's going wrong. Now, there are a great many other things. You see, I think we've gone into this, that thought is not behaving rationally. You see, that they wouldn't do that. If thought, to be rational about it, you would say we must acknowledge the fact of our interdependence and behave accordingly. You know, but people don't seem to do it, you see. There's a thought, it seems to be very hard for people to think that way, generally speaking. I mean, some people may, but you know, it's very hard. See, it's been said, some people have come out with the idea of what they call the Gaia hypothesis, namely, the Earth is like a single organism. The whole of life on this planet, it makes a kind of organism which is very stable and which responds to protect itself, you know. And some people are very favorable to this hypothesis, saying if you believe it, then you would begin to put the Earth first. You see, it's like saying some cells of the body wouldn't put themselves first if they are part of the whole body. And of course they do sometimes. They're cancer cells. They grow first. They just keep on growing independent of the body, right? So you could say that this whole process, from the point of view of the Gaia hypothesis, what's going on is the proliferation of cancer all over the planet, right? Now, see, a few people take this hypothesis seriously, but you see, very few are really, as yet anyway, letting it change their whole approach, right? But maybe someday it will have an effect, you see. Now, you see, it's similar to a virus, you see, also a cancer, a virus. If you take a virus, it spreads, you see, there's a certain pattern of proteins in there, DNA, and when it enters your body, it sort of gives instructions to your body to make more of the same, right? Right? And then when you pass it on to somebody else, the same happens. It goes on and on. You see, so this information can be like a virus. We have a whole amount of thought, of knowledge, of information spreading all over the world. But the more computers and radio and television we have, the faster it spreads, right? And therefore, the virus of violence can spread, right? The virus of greed or the virus of fear. Or, in fact, you may have read in the papers, computers can be infected with similar viruses. That there's a bit of information which says spread this to another, the same pattern to another computer with instructions to spread it again and again. Right? It's very similar. So, you see, somehow this is a disease of thought, of knowledge, of information. Right? You see, you can see that is subject to a disease. And this has very serious consequences. These diseases can kill human beings or whole societies physically, or they can kill us. The diseases of knowledge and thought can kill us in another way, or even destroy the planet. Right, so, so if you go into that, you can see that somehow there's a wrong way of thinking that is behind these vast set of troubles. You see, it spreads. Each one excites the other. You see, one form of nationalism excites another. I have a friend in Israel, a professor of social geography, who pointed out that Jewish nationalism in the form of Zionism provoked Palestinian nationalism. In the beginning, there never was any. They never thought of themselves as a nation, right? But you see, one provoked the other and provoked the other back and back, right? And it was all thought, right? In other words, nationalism cannot be anything else but thought, saying we belong to this nation, this territory is ours, right? Now it happens that both of these nations are saying this territory is ours. So what are they going to do? You see, they say we are different. Thought tells us we are different. We cannot get together. You know, we have got to be separate. Thought also tells us this nation belongs to us. This land, right? It's the same thing. You say you have land and you say this is mine. Now, how in the world could it be mine? You see, if you look at land, there's nothing in the land which says it's mine, right? There was a famous Indian chief, Chief Seattle or something of that name, who wrote to the President of the United States of that time, a long time ago. And I was saying they wanted to make a treaty to buy land from the Indians, and he said, we cannot understand how anybody could own land. You know, so you see, it's a way of thinking. These Indians did not think that way, but the people in Washington did, obviously. Now, the point is that the ownership of land is entirely in thought. Right? If you think you own it, you own it. You see it, provided everybody else will think the same way. You know? If somebody else won't agree with you, then you've got to fight, right? So, now, therefore, fights over land are entirely due to the way of thinking, right? You may say, man, this is the way it is, and we'd better stick to it, but when people were fairly separate and so on, and not too many of them, this might have worked up to a point, but now we're all interdependent, and it won't work, you see. So money also is thought, right? You see, originally they took gold, but gold doesn't have much value in itself. You know, you can't eat gold or anything, and but it was exchanged, right? Now, then gold was replaced by paper, which is even less valuable. And then paper is replaced by bank accounts, and bank accounts are now replaced by little electric currents in computers, another form of thought, right? So, therefore, according to what the computer thinks, if the computer thinks you have a lot of money, then you're all right. So if it doesn't think that way, then you cannot get access to what you need, right? So you can see how pervasive this problem of thought is. Say, this nation, that nation, we against them, one family against another, one race against another, one color against another. You see, it's thought which makes those problems very big, right? Now, you see, I think we were talking about last year, suppose you have a black man and somebody comes up and says, you know, I don't like them, and of course, but the fact that he's black is not is picked out by thought, right? You see, he might, as he said, be a banker. Somebody who didn't like bankers would say, I don't like him because he's a banker, right? Or I don't like him because he's Jewish, or I don't like him because he's a communist, or whatever. You see, all of that is thought, right? In other words, people, according to how you think, you have your prejudice goes accordingly, right? Okay, so I think then that's a sort of a review that I'm saying that thought is behind these problems, and that people generally haven't thought that way. See, in the beginning, thought was considered to be, and it still is, a very valuable thing. Thought also has done all the things which we are proud of, you see. It has built our cities. It has, well, we shouldn't be too proud of them, I suppose. But it has created science and technology and all the things we see. Everything you see in this room, or in practically all of what is called nature here, has been arranged by thought, right? And agricultural and everything, you see. So everything we do has been arranged by thought, right? And it has been very creative, you know, medicine and all sorts of achievements, right? And yet thought also goes wrong somehow, and it produces all this destruction. Now, in the past, people may not have noticed this and have thought only that thought is knowledge is power, you know, ignorance is bad, and so on. But there's a certain danger in knowledge and in thought, which people haven't paid enough attention to. Right? And so okay, we have all this thought, and and it's somehow not going right, you see. Maybe it started to go wrong thousands or tens of thousands of years ago, we don't know. If you go back through history, as far as we know, it wasn't doing very well. I mean, there have been endless wars as far back as it goes. There has been slavery, exploitation, plunder, you know, every manner of chaos, every manner of deception. If you go through the Bible, it was always there. If you go back in almost any history, it was always there. You know, and perhaps if you go far enough back, it wasn't so bad because people didn't have the weapons to do much harm, right? But the more technology developed, the more dangerous it became. And now that technology has gone so far, it has become really deadly. You see? It has really become impossible for us to imagine going on with it indefinitely. As I say, for 1,000 years, if you imagine 1,000 years of what's going on now, what will happen? Will there not be some catastrophe or other? Therefore, with the growth of technology, the human race is faced with a tremendous crisis or a challenge, right? That we have got to do something about this thought, right? We have got we can't just let it go on destroying us. I mean, just if you've got a cancer growing in you, you say, well, at some stage I'd better do something about it. Now, a cancer starts to grow slowly, but at some stage it starts to grow very fast and spread. And you say the quicker you do something about it, the better. And that's really where we are, you see. Now, but then what do you do about it? You see, you can't cut out thought. I mean, we couldn't do without it, right? You can't just say, all the bad thoughts are going to be cut out, you see. You can't select them all and cut them out. And so we have to go into it more deeply. I say this is not an obvious thing, you see. It's very subtle. And it goes very deep, you see. Right? Now, we want to get to the root of it, right? To the base, to the source of it. You see, if you imagine a stream which is being polluted near the source, and then people downstream don't know about that, so they start removing bits of pollution, trying to purify their water, but perhaps introducing more pollution of another kind as they do so. And therefore, what we've got to do is to see this whole stream and get to the source of it. You see, somewhere at the source of thought it is being polluted. That's the suggestion. It is being diverted in some way. It is going in the. It is, you say, taking a wrong turn, but it's taking a wrong turn all the time. You see. You could say in one sense, when they started pouring pollution in, that was the wrong step. But the fact they keep on pouring it in is the main point. It's pouring in all the time. So therefore, the source is not in time, not to go back to ancient times when it may have started, but rather the source is always now. And that's what we have to look into, you see. Right, so that was more or less sort of some summary of some of the things we talked about last time, and in the beginning. And now we'll go on. I want to go on with trying to see how we're going to go about it. But perhaps people would like to discuss it a bit first.